Welcome to a live episode of Campus Life, the college flagship, we go live once and I messed this up the first time. We go live.
I know.
They're not going to believe what I said last week now that I wasn't messing this up.
They're definitely not.
No,
they're definitely not. They're going to think we edited that. Yep.
I'm not going to redo it now. We're live. F it. We're live. I can't fix this now.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
We do maybe 2 or 3 of these live shows a year, and even that might be generous.
Maybe.
Did we? So we've been doing this show for like 3 or 4 years now. So was there a time where we did this show live ever, like regularly, or no? Right?
No.
Okay.
No, this was never a live show.
Okay. Well, there we go. I don't know where I am tonight. I'm Austin. He's Colin.
And this is Colin.
2024 college football season's over, guys. We wanted to do just a fun, wrap up show with you guys, essentially. Have you in here with us. We're going to talk. We're going to give out awards for the year. We are going to talk a little bit about some of the guys that are already saying they're going to hop in the portal, because I think it's never too early to talk about it. I know the C2C Live guys did it earlier, but I wasn't on there. I wasn't able to give my opinion aside from being in the chat. So we're going to do a little bit of that. We're going to look forward a little bit to next year already. We're going to try to pick out a guy to we're going to say our biggest offseason buy, and then a guy to avoid or sell as of today. That we calling him this in 2025's Ollie Gordon is going to be the award title there. But I think it's going to be just a chill show, Colin. Are you capable of doing that with me?
I'm so chill all the time. Cap and chill over here.
Okay. Or I guess we'll just get right into this then.
Were you thinking do-over? Did you want to just like start it over and run it back?
No, we're a minute 58 in now. It's too late. It's too late. I've talked too much already. I'm warmed up. Housekeeping, guys, just real quick, and we're going to do it even quicker than usual. Early signing day show this week on Wednesday. That is the 4th. That kicks off at 1 p.m. Eastern, and we're going to go for 3 hours. We're going to talk as many of the freshmen as we can in this upcoming class from a fantasy, C2C perspective. So check out that. It's going to be me, Felix, and Matt Bruni are going to be on there. We're going to have some other people popping in as we go. Home Field Apparel. Head on over to Home Field Apparel, guys. Promo code Campus2Canton get you 15% off your first purchase. And then Underdog, promo code C2C for deposit match up to $250. We've already got some comments flying in here. We're going to try to address all of them as we go here. Someone's just a chill guy.
Yeah.
Mike Valerie says copying back to Devi this week. No, Mike, we are recording first. You are copying us. And then Davey Cake says, how many Campus to Canton shows are there? Weren't Felix and the guys just live streaming? Okay, Davey Cakes. Here's the deal here. We're live, so we can say this. Monday night's our night. I don't know where Felix, Matt, and Chris got the balls, got the gumption to come in here and steal our night on the Campus to Canton network, but they did it. This is usually not a live show, Davey Cakes, for anybody. This is a podcast. We've been doing this. This is episode 221, 4 years or so into this now, or something like that. It's our weekly C2C show, focusing mostly on the college half of C2C leagues. Colin and I host it every week, and we're the best show on the network. So the numbers reflect it. The numbers reflect it. There's no arguing it. So that's how many Campus to Canton shows there are. There are actually like 6 or 7 full Campus to Canton shows.
We do. We try to do one show a week. But like Austin said, this is our night. And we were giving everybody a little treat tonight, live show. Not something we do very often, like we were talking about as we opened the show. We've done maybe 2 or 3. But yeah, so just giving everybody a little live show to end the season.
Felix couldn't let us have that. He couldn't let us have that.
No.
So Davey Cakes, and he says, that's a lot of shows. Yeah, I mean, if you haven't checked out the podcast feed, we try to cover college football, from a fantasy perspective, from pretty much any angle that you possibly can. So, DFS, player props, college fantasy, C2C, Devi, just general college football, recruiting. We try to cover from all the angles. So, you need a lot of shows to do it. So, and lots of different hosts. So, lots of different smart people out there that are going to talk to you. Let's get right into the news here, Colin. They covered, as we're talking about here, there was a show that was recorded earlier tonight here on the YouTube channel. The C2C Live guys went and talked a lot about coaching, hirings, firings, transfer portal, you name it. So I don't want to just do a ton of that, but I did just want to pull a couple of the names that have already announced they're hitting the portal here and discuss them, the two of us, since we haven't had a chance to do that yet live. And I think I want to lead off with Michael Hudson, if you're the coaching staff there at Texas Tech. They said that in an interview, six weeks ago, maybe at this point. Micah Hudson, who we had as the top wide receiver in the class this year, and I think all the services had him as a 5-star guy. Underwhelming year, but did cross a bunch of the year 1-0 thresholds, which are some very minimum thresholds that we have that, kind of are fairly predictive as to whether you might make it to the NFL or not. He did hit some of these thresholds, so we still like Micah Hudson, but he wasn't getting the playing time that maybe we thought he should be at Texas Tech. So he's leaving. He's from Texas. I mean, I don't know, Colin. Where do you think that he's going to go here? I mean, or you don't even have to speculate on that. Like, just what do you think of this move for him? It's smart.
Yeah, I think it is a smart move because he, like you said, he wasn't getting the playing time that we were expecting him to get. I mean, you see, like you said, broke all the year 1-0s. We like that. We like to see that. But we really thought that, maybe Josh Kelly leads the team in receiving, but we thought Micah Hudson could be like a close number 2, a strong number 2. And that just was not the case. I mean, he struggled with health a little bit earlier in the year. They spread the ball around a lot. Guys like Quay Aiken and Caleb Douglas, Jalen Conyers at tight end. Taj Brooks caught a decent number of passes too. So they were just spreading the ball around. And then with Zach Kitley leaving as well, the offensive coordinator, I think that was just really putting the writing on the wall too. And I think maybe the announcement for Hudson came before Kitley, but you had to think he had some inkling of an idea there. So I think this is a good move for him. Kind of resets the clock a little bit. I'll be interested to see where he goes. Like you said, he is a Texas kid. And I believe Texas, the school, was pretty high on his recruiting list. Not that I know if he's going to go there or anything, but I could see him wanting to stay close to home. And, Texas A&M could use a lead wide receiver. SMU could use a lead wide receiver. They look great this year. So that meant maybe that's a little step lateral and he could go a little higher if he wants, but he's got options.
Yeah, something tells me he stays moderately local. He hasn't played a snap, and I actually didn't realize this entirely. I thought he was getting like a handful of snaps and not doing anything, but he hadn't played a snap since week 9. So
wow.
I thought he was playing 2-3 snaps here or there. I think this was kind of already decided a while ago. And I don't think the Kitley stuff actually had anything to do with it because of that. But also, I suspect he's probably not going to be following Zach Kitley after his experience this year. He did come in. You mentioned he had some injury stuff earlier in the year. He came into the year he had meniscus surgery in the offseason, I believe, and so he missed like the spring and stuff like that. That wasn't really able to participate.
Did he have something with the shoulder too?
I just knew about the knee.
Okay.
So. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of places you mentioned too there, SMU and what was the other one you mentioned that was good? I don't think we'll go to
A&M.
Texas. Yeah, A&M. Thank you. Yeah, I don't think we'll go to Texas. They've got 2. I mean, we'll see Wednesday. Maybe they don't, but we think they have 2 5-star-ish wide receivers coming in, plus a log jam there already. Oklahoma would actually be really interesting. They're going to lose Deion Burks. I don't know. Do we decide to Burks ended up coming back and playing and burning a potential red shirt, and I don't think he has any eligibility left. We had this debate a few weeks ago.
Yeah, we did have this debate a few weeks ago. I'm not sure off the top of my head. If you can filibuster for maybe 30 seconds.
Well, and you look at the rest of that depth chart, it isn't good. I mean, I think we kind of knew that coming into this year. I think that he could play there maybe. They've got Arbuckle coming in. They're going to sling that around, you would think. So, I mean, I think he stays in that region. He has 1 year left if he wants it.
Burks has 1 year left, even if he burns the eligibility this year, burns the red shirt this year. And that is according to the CFB Winning Edge team profiles, C2C Winning Edge membership at the site.
I have to be careful saying burning the red shirt too many times because then we owe residuals to the Burning the Red Shirt podcast. So I think that's actually the last time we're allowed to say it this episode. Now we'll have to figure out a different name or a different way to phrase that for tonight.
You know how I get when I latch on to one phrase. So
oh man,
we're in trouble.
Just open up the pocketbook. I got my wallet right here. We'll We'll be writing a check by the end of this, I'm sure. So Hudson in the portal. I think that'll be interesting. We've got some people in the chats. Shane says Kay's going to want to collect. I expect an invoice. Well, he doesn't listen to our show. We listen to his show. He doesn't listen to our show.
That's a good point.
It's a little messed up, but it is what it is. There's a behind the scenes peek at Camps Canton. And I always tell them I listen to the DFS show on Sunday mornings because I don't play CFP DFS, and so I don't. There's no context for me. I just I listen on Sunday and hear if they were right or wrong. That's a lot more fun for me. People are asking. Well, actually, this is the next one that we have on the list here. So let's hop right to it here. Kevin Concepcion and Eric Rivers, somebody mentioned here as well, both in the transfer portal. Kevin Concepcion, a down year. I think he was a pretty hyped guy for CFF purposes at NC State. There, they had revolving door a little bit at quarterback. True freshman coming in, playing well, but you don't necessarily trust true freshmen to support a bunch of wide receivers necessarily for fantasy, and so Concepcion definitely had a worse year than he did last year. Just looking at his total stats, he finished with 88 targets, 53 catches for 460 yards and 6 touchdowns. Like he had to do a lot of low ADOT, kind of design stuff because they just couldn't get him the ball otherwise. He's in the portal now. His brother, we kind of had an inkling about this a week or two ago because his brother, who was also a wide receiver, was committed to NC State and decommitted and has since committed to Kansas State. Is that where we think Kevin Concepcion goes?
That's a great question.
I think they at least get a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if he settles there. What do you think?
I think Chris Moxley, more like Robert Anoy. Jace Brown is in the portal, right? Or was that like a fake rumor?
That's a fake rumor. But this time of the year with those kinds of fake rumors, I tend to think that it's like somebody who wasn't supposed to found out early, and the players come out and say it's not happening, and then 4 days later they post their "Thank you God" picture on Twitter. I think that's what's going to happen here, if I had to guess.
I would be surprised if Brown doesn't enter the portal, but if Brown does enter the portal, I could see Concepcion going there. Now, is that a good idea for Concepcion? Maybe playing time, probably, but in terms of like putting up actual fantasy points, I don't really want to own a Kansas State wide receiver on my roster for CFF purposes. And I think we were always a little bit concerned with how Concepcion would translate to the NFL level, given the level of gadgety type plays, the way that he was schemed open so much at NC State as a freshman, which not necessarily a bad thing as a freshman. It's nice to see that they want to get him involved, but he didn't really take that step forward this year that we kind of thought or wanted to see from him. So at worst, he's kind of stays stagnant and maybe even, drops a little bit in Devy rankings and stuff. So I don't think it's really going to be a great point. Oh, and now somebody says Penn State. There we go. Love Kevin Concepcion. Great player. Really want to see him go to Penn State. We could use all the wide receivers we could get. I take back everything bad I've ever said about Kevin Concepcion.
I mean, he would be the best receiver on that roster, right? Was it 2 weeks ago on this show or a different show where I said he seems like a Colorado player to me?
You might have actually.
I did. It's because somebody tweeted about it. I think that he could go there. I think that'd be a bummer because from like a talent perspective, I do not think he's better than a couple of the receivers they already have there, and it would annoy me because they would probably see a decrease in snaps and targets because of it. And I already am unsure of what to think of that Colorado offense moving forward. So that would really, really annoy me. But kind of, all flash, no substance. That's kind of where those guys tend to land. So could be a good spot there for him. I don't think he goes to Kansas State either. But I will say they lose DJ Giddens. To me, there's not an obvious DJ Giddens replacement. Like the second back there all year has been Dylan Edwards. And I know they had what's his name? tiny little guy a couple years ago who was really good for them for like 3
Deuce
years.
Vaughn.
He's on the Cowboys now. Yeah, Deuce Vaughn.
Deuce
Thank
Vaughn.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I know they've kind of done that in the past, but it is a little bit of a different like staff offensively speaking. I'm not sure that they want to do that. So like is that a portal thing? Is it somebody deeper on the roster that's just a name that we're not really that familiar with right now? Maybe, but I do think there's also a chance that they just pass more, pending Avery Johnson, doing better. So that's kind of the limiting factor. What'd you say?
Yeah, I said being a good passer.
Yeah, I mean that's the limiting factor there. So I mean, but I do think there is that is potentially something that could happen in Kansas State, and it would make you feel a little bit better about whoever the receivers are there. That we're talking about. Does Keegan Johnson have any eligibility left? He had a good game recently, I think.
That's talk about one guy that I was hyped for.
You were really high
and then just has not really panned out the way I thought. I mean, he just needs to get out of the Midwest. He should, if he has eligibility left, he needs to go somewhere where they actually throw the ball.
If you're a wide receiver, you just shouldn't go to school in the Midwest, really. I mean, what like big passing schools are there that are producing a ton of NFL draft talent there? None really. I mean, Texas is not Midwest, for the record. Texas is Texas.
And neither is Ohio. Ohio State, that's not Midwest either.
I agree. So
okay.
I mean, yeah, now that we've narrowed our parameters to fit our narrative here, I don't think there are any schools in there that do a good job with that. So we'll see where he went. Speaking of players like that, like Kevin Concepcion that are in the portal, Caleb Brown re-entered the portal again. And this also ties into Keegan Johnson. Two guys. Colin, actually, I'm going to change the screen view here.
Whoa.
We're just going to zoom us in a little bit. That's how we record when we're doing it just ourselves. But live, we're gonna zoom in here a little bit. He was the guy that was at Ohio State. Ohio's not Midwest, says the two guys from PA. Are we wrong? I don't know.
I don't think so.
I wouldn't. How given like 3/4 of the country is Midwest then by these standards? I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced. He was a guy that left Ohio State, and he was part of that group that went to Iowa, and they were all talking all that crap. Him, Cade McNamara, Eric All, and they were they just haven't had the right dudes in here yet, blah 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 blah. And by the way, about a week ago, I tweeted out because Cade McNamara, there's like some rumors that stuff was going on behind the scenes there, and that's why he wasn't playing at the end of the season. And I tweeted out, there's there's nobody who's had more misplaced confidence than Cade McNamara. And somebody bookmarked it. How much do you want to bet that it's Cade McNamara?
It might
there's a non-zero chance that it was him. I don't know who else would do it. Nobody else gives a shit about Cade McNamara. But I digress. Caden Salter, quarterback, formerly of Liberty, and I swear to God, I'm going to try so hard not to crap all over Liberty this episode. Is leaving Liberty. We said we thought that he should have done this last offseason, and it did not happen. It's going to happen this year. I don't know. I mean, he's coming off a considerably worse year. We didn't think we'd see a step back because Jimmy Chadwell's been a good coach. He has a pretty reputation with limited passers in the past. So, I mean, was this year a Caden Salter problem? Was it a Jamie Chadwell problem? Was it neither? And he just needs to go somewhere different? What do you think?
Man, that's really hard to say because he had such a great year 2 years ago or last year. But I mean, it was the same offense. He lost CJ Daniels at wide receiver, but did that really make that much of a difference? I don't know.
He lost somebody else too, didn't he? I think he did. I think they lost their two leading wide receivers or something.
That wouldn't surprise me. But, and like you said, Chadwell at Coastal Carolina had Grayson McCall, who was hyper efficient. It was great. So I don't know what happened this year. And we'll talk a little bit more about Salter later, but I think this is going to be a good move for him. I know we were talking in the Discord or in the Slack about did he blow his shot at a Power 5 school? I don't think he did. I think there's enough P5 teams that are going to be looking for a quarterback in the portal and not enough good quarterbacks to go around, that I think he'll still get like a decent Power 5 spot. Probably SEC, could he get Auburn? Could he get Ole Miss? Could he get maybe even A&M? They'll probably be in the portal. So I think there's going to be enough schools. Missouri will probably be looking for somebody to replace Brady Cook. I think there's going to be enough schools that'll be interested in him that he'll get a Power 5 shot, which was kind of what I talked about at the beginning of the year. Like, I thought he would have a really good year this year and then would take the jump up to the Power 5 level and really try and prove it there so he could improve his draft stock. Didn't have the good year. Is he still going to get that jump? I'm not totally out on Salter yet, but I mean, you have to be very concerned.
So here's the thing, and I think I disagree a little bit with the direction you went here, but let's presume for a second that I kind of agree with you that, Auburn would come calling. A lot of these schools last year, I think, would have brought him in with the intention for him to just be the starter right off the bat. And this year, I think if he makes that jump if those same schools are interested, they're bringing them in to compete for the job. Probably. I think that's a big difference for a guy like him who is not coming off a strong year. And, I think there's a stink of failure on him right now. I really do. I mean, I completed 56% of his passes, essentially 15 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. His yards per attempt were not particularly good. I actually want to pull up his QBR and his EPA per play, both of which can be found on campus2canton.com. While I'm doing that, I just think I don't see a natural fit out there for him right now. I think he's going to have to wait for the Thomas Castellanoses and that tier of player to come off the board, and then hope that whatever's left is good enough.
So you don't think there's a stink of failure on Thomas Castellanos? Are you like Felix putting all that blame on Bill O'Brien?
I think people are going to be willing to put a lot of blame on Bill O'Brien. Yeah, I do. Because he was so good the year before. And Castellanos wasn't even, in my opinion, bad this year. He just kind of wasn't what Bill O'Brien wanted. Mm-hmm. So I don't think he had a bad year. Certainly wasn't as bad as Caden Salters. I don't know.
Well, I mean, Ferris in the chat was saying his underlying metrics, he doesn't think he dropped off that much. And his offensive line played worse. Wide receiver room was missing some playmakers. So, I think there's enough to contextualize there that I could see some teams still being interested in him. And James Marks in the chat also said Salter was potentially looking at Indiana and Syracuse. So still Power 5 interest there.
Yeah, just quickly. I mean, there's not really good metrics for projecting quarterbacks to the NFL, but the ones that we found that are kind of the best are either QBR, believe it or not, and then EPA per play. He took massive nosedives in both this year. Last year's EPA per play, 0.65, so expected points added on any given play, 0.65 over the course of a game. This year, 0.35, so basically cut it in half. His QBR this year was about 50. 100 is the max, and usually you'd say a player's having a good season if they're hitting 75 to 80 and above. Obviously, you hope to get as close to 100 as possible. So, definitely a step back there. Syracuse would be an interesting spot. Mm-hmm. I don't know what to expect from Syracuse moving forward, because you have to think a lot of what happened this year from a game plan perspective was Kyle McCord, who nobody here at Campus Canton liked him at all coming into the year.
No,
for the record,
no, totally out of nowhere.
Nobody thought he would have a good year. Nobody thought he would lead the conference in passing. Nobody thought any of these things. He ended up leading the country in passing, allegedly. Mm-hmm. So, I think that team. I don't know. If they're looking for something that's stylistically similar to Kyle McCord, I don't know that Caden Salter would be the first person I would call. But I mean, if you're Syracuse kind of has to be one of those schools where you kind of have to go with the flow of what you can pick up from a talent perspective. Does that seem fair to you? So if you pick up 3, if they bring in 3 250-pound running backs because that's what's available, then you're just going to be a ground and pound team. And if you bring in Kyle McCord, then you're going to throw it 60 times a game. I mean, I think that's kind of what they are. So maybe Fran Brown and company is smart enough to do that. I'm not entirely sure. I think Indiana would be a failure, quite frankly. But who knows? Who knows? And somebody in the comments, is this Kyle McCord's dad? Not allegedly, fake news. He led the whole United States of America of college football. Oh, the United States of America of college football. That is a new entity in passing yards.
Are we sure about that stat? I mean, I'm not sure that he led all of college football. There's some D2 schools that put up a lot of numbers.
That's true. We'll need to look into that. We'll have our stat guy look into it and get back to everybody on that. Any under the radar players, Colin? Those are the 3 big names that stuck out to me just first glance. And there's a lot of different guys floating around out there right now. Anybody catch your eye? Wow, Matt Bruni says D2 is not real football. Once again, I am the man of the people here at this company, just for the record.
Yeah. Also, Zach Zabrowski from Central Missouri, the Mules, threw for 4,462 passing yards. So I think he led the United States of America of college football.
This is really passing. A shot at Felix Sharp, who played Division II college football. And Matt, your feud with Felix is too much. It's gone too far.
Mm-hmm. Fun fact, Jackson Ostrowski from Lock Haven was 5th in passing in D2. Yeah.
No kidding.
Yep.
Interesting. Small PA state school.
Yeah. Yep.
For anybody not familiar.
Yeah. Huh. Yep.
Fun. There's occasionally a PA team that does really well. Didn't Shippensburg make it to the national championship game or something a few years ago? I think when we were in school, or right around that time.
Yeah, they had. I think that was when they had. Who was? They had an offensive head coach that was really good. He made a jump up to the Power 5 level.
I don't know.
Can't remember who it was, but yeah, no, they did well. They did well.
Gannon sent their head coach to be defense coordinator at Oklahoma State last year, 2 years ago too. So yeah, PA, man. I don't know about the college sports here. Pretty decent. Any under the radar. Matt Bruni says if it was a serious school, they'd be D1. I mean,
well, Liberty's a D1 school, so
Yeah. Oh, I think it's one of those all rectangle, or what is it, all rectangles are squares, but not all squares are rectangles. Yeah. I think we're in that kind of.
All squares are rectangles, not all rectangles are squares.
Thank you. There you go. See, James Marks. Okay, he's a P guy, right? IUP and Slippery Rock were good this year as well. Yeah, there's usually a couple of schools around here. And Slippery Rock, if you're an alum, they got cool stuff on home field apparel. So,
very true. Very true.
All right, under the radar player. Do you have one?
Sorry, I totally missed the question there. What was it? Under the radar player in the portal right now?
Yes, sir. No, just in college football. D1, D2, D3. Even though that's right. I did remember that Pittsburgh guy, James is.
Somebody mentioned it a little bit earlier. Eric Rivers, from Florida International. He had a really nice year this year. I think that's kind of an under the radar player. We'll see where he makes that jump up to. I'm assuming he's going to take the jump up. Now, granted, the head coach for FIU got fired, so he was probably just going to leave anyway. But I think he had a good enough year that he'll draw some Power 5 interest, P4 interest. And we'll see where he ends up. Somebody in the chat said about Michigan. I don't know that would be a great spot for him, but and we've seen mixed results, to say the least, for players who jump from the G5 to P4 level. But Elijah Surratt had a really nice year this year, so it's not unprecedented. So he's a player that I want to keep an eye on here. He's a player I had picked up on a couple of leagues at the very end of the year. So I am selfishly invested.
All right. I just have one here, under the radar transfer portal player. Creed Whitmore entered the portal, Mississippi State wide receiver. He was listed as an athlete, but he plays wide receiver coming out of high school. 5'11", mid 180s. He's 75th percentile athlete in our database, but like 90th percentile speed, 96th percentile agility. He's got really good, just general athletic metrics. And he's a non-year 1-0. Like, he's one of those sneaky guys that like is probably just absolutely free. And if he lands somewhere fun, even if it's not from an NFL perspective, imagine Creed Whitmore going and being the leading receiver at, a Texas State or something like that. I think that could be a really, really interesting guy or a North Texas or like one of those teams. I don't know what kind of level he's going to be shooting for, but I do think he can go be a fun player somewhere and maybe get a little bit of draft buzz depending on where he lands. So that's just one for me as we're taking an initial look here. We're going to talk awards, but we'll hit questions if they come up here and I feel like taking them. So I generally how this show goes, if I feel like doing it, we can do it. Poi asks, where are both of you taking Jordan Tyson next year if he stays at Arizona State and comes back? Jordan Tyson has 1,000 yards this year, and it's a bummer. It sounds like he broke his collarbone probably this weekend, so probably out for the rest of Arizona State's season. Really bummer for Arizona State. He was kind of really their only threatening wide receiver, I think. But let's assume that he does come back, and I think a lot of us are assuming that right now. I know some of us probably have him slightly too high here at the company, but I do think that he should
some
be
of us.
Well, we took him. We did a mock a couple weeks ago. Where did he go with us? 4th round, 5th round? I have to go back and look. Right. And that feels reasonable to him for him. If he crept up past like the late 3rd, I don't think I would feel comfortable taking him anymore.
Yeah.
I would
agree with that. I have him slotted in. Yeah, I have him slotted in as my wide receiver 25 right now. I have him in a group with Eugene Wilson, Trey Harris. Now Trey Harris is going to go off to the NFL, so we'll see. So that's kind of where I have him at right now. I think it's a good spot. And we'll see kind of how the offseason shakes out, who declares, who comes back. I don't have any freshmen in here either at this point, so we'll have to slot some of the incoming freshmen like DeCorian Moore, for French, Lockett, those types of guys. So we'll see how I end up slotting him, but I think that was a good call. About the 4th-ish round feels right for him.
And he went as the 412 in that draft, and as I just look at some of the names in front of him, I think you could argue him above several of them. I think.
Are you just going to name off all the guys that I picked?
I would take him over Bo Jackson. I would take him over. Well, I picked James Peoples. I would probably take him over James Peoples. I would probably take him over David Eziamume, Jordan Marshall. I mean, about half that round for sure. So
yeah,
I think like late 3rd's the highest I could get him though. Yeah, I really
that feels about right. I'm okay with that.
And then somebody also asks, what round would you draft Emmett Mosley in a 2025 C2C supplemental draft? Round 2, 3. Supplemental, I might even.
Oh, supplemental.
That feels right. That feels right. It would really depend on, as with all these questions, like I know they're hypotheticals, but like it really depends on what other players are there from the pool from the year prior, because that can change things a little bit. Like I know I have a league where we don't do any waivers through the year. I probably wouldn't quite take him that early in that league, but like in a normal league, I think mid-late 2nd, I'd probably be tempted, depending on how the board's falling. Yeah, that feels right. I think there's a little bit of a risk in after their freshman years immediately getting aggressive on some of these really lowly ranked freshman wide receivers, like specific to the wide receiver position. I think more of those guys end up flaming out than not and kind of being, flash of the pan. So I wouldn't be super aggressive on Emmett Mosley, but I don't think certainly a chance that you're getting a really good CFF player potentially beyond that, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, we have to see how Stanford ends up looking, I mean, Stanford was an offense this year that there were definitely people in the CFF community who thought that this was going to be a good year for that Stanford offense, take a step in year 2 of the Troy Taylor system. And they just kind of couldn't get the quarterback situation really figured out. Ashton Daniels didn't really take a step forward. So I think round 2, 3 feels about right for Emmett Mosley. It kind of depends on your philosophy and your team structure. I tend to be targeting CFF guys in that stretch, and I think there's going to be better CFF players available once all the craziness shakes out with like who transfer portal and declaring and everything like that. So I think there's probably going to end up being better CFF options available there. So I might lean a little bit later, maybe closer to 3, 4, but I don't think it's a bad idea to take him early third.
All right, let's get to the awards here, Colin. And we have just a couple of categories. We have regular season MVP, regular season LVP, so least valuable player, playoff MVP. I thought there should be a different category for that. Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to do players that we were the most right on and players that we were the most wrong on. So this is always fun. And then we're going to wrap it up with the biggest offseason buy that we have right now, and then biggest avoid, aka who's going to pull an Ollie Gordon in 2025. So let's jump right into this, Colin. The regular season MVP. I know we took very different approaches to this question. I didn't put my answer.
Well, I wrote a name down.
Yeah.
We took different approaches, and then I wrote a name down, and you didn't.
I told you I wanted there to be some shock value when I told you this live. We're hamming it up for the cameras today, Colin.
Okay.
Let's go ahead. Who's your regular season MVP?
Yeah, I mean, Ferris nailed it in the chat. John Mateer is the MVP here for sure. I mean, just the year that he had, I finished as the QB1 in terms of fantasy. So, you know, I mean, he had a fantastic year, and at the value you were getting him at, I mean, this is C2C ADP, but his average draft position was 322. You know, so the value you got for taking him that late is incredible. And I think there's one other name that I'll be interested to see if that's the route that you go that I would entertain in this conversation, but I think it's got to be Mateer. Honestly, I feel like you guys were talking about it in the program chat, or like in the finals there, where there was just like a ton of teams with Mateer. Like,
no, there were only 2 teams. There were only 2 teams with Mateer.
Okay,
I was one of them. So, yeah,
I feel like the championship teams, a lot of them had Mateer. So,
I was the only Mateer team with Kyle Williams stack, which didn't end up mattering at all in the finals because Corey put up 500,000 points. So it didn't matter at all. It's fine. I'm not salty. I haven't been there 3 years in a row and lost every single time. Not bitter. So here's I went a different direction because I think, and like, just tell me if you disagree with this premise before I get into it.
Oh boy.
I think the most valuable picks that you can make in a C2C like startup / supplemental draft every year are the true freshman running backs that are some of the last true freshman running backs that are regularly drafted in these leagues. I'm talking like those guys that are like, you know, RB 20 to, you know, or like 15 to 25 in their class. It's kind of this jumbled mess where everyone kind of says, you know, you're just kind of picking a guy in this grouping and hoping that they turn out correct. But if you nail it, you get so much instant value out of it for your C2C rosters. Would you agree or disagree with that premise?
I agree with the overall premise in that nailing that a running back like that in that stretch, you know, you're taking them very late. I'm assuming those types of players you're taking round 30 or later.
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah. And then supplementals, you know, around 8, 9, 10 plus. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, those players, if you hit on them, they do significantly jump in value. I don't think I can call them an MVP, though. Now, I want to hear the name that you're about to throw out.
So I'm going to say, from that perspective, Caden Durham is the MVP this year. A guy that you are probably getting really, really late in drafts, who we now have as in our rankings RB23 overall for C2C, RB21 for Devi, and he'll be top 10 after all these guys leave this season. You drafted a top 10 running back going into next year for basically nothing. He had a ton of startable weeks this week for fantasy, ran for over 100 yards multiple times. End of the year averaging over 5 yards per carry, 6 touchdowns. That was a receiving threat as well. I'm going to put Caden Durham. I'm going to go a little contrarian here, like just in terms of overall value added. Those guys, when you nail them, they're so valuable to your rosters, and Durham is that guy this year.
I understand where you're coming from, and I don't hate.
That's nicer than I would have been to you.
Yeah, 100%
of this, by the way.
Yes, so. Absolutely. But people who are tuning in, I'm assuming most of them kind of know the dynamic here. But
Big bro,
I think it's a lot. There are a lot of valid points in there, but I just have a hard time calling anybody an MVP on the college side of a C2C or like any sort of a format like that where you can win a championship who doesn't really contribute to you winning a championship this year. Now, long-term value gain, like, yeah, it was a great pickup. Could potentially be a guy for you in the NFL who could do something too, where John Mateer probably not going to be a guy in the in the NFL for you. But I don't think that long term. I don't have that kind of attention span. I need the immediate. I need that dopamine hit now. Give me that championship. That's why I got to go with
It's so funny because you don't ever win any.
I won 2 this year. All right.
Did you really?
So, I did. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Back to back in 2 leagues.
What kind of Make-A-Wish leagues were these?
Well, you're in one of them.
My point stands. Gotta let the little guy win.
Ferris brings up Isaac Brown. Now, if you wanted to talk to me about Isaac Brown being
the
MVP,
yeah,
I think I would entertain that one, because if you took Isaac Brown, you probably didn't take Isaac Brown in a draft. You picked him up off the waivers.
No, 100%.
If you did, like, show us your draft pick of Isaac Brown. I love it.
He was getting a little hype late in the off season. So like if you drafted your sub draft real late, there's like a very, very, very small chance that he got taken late. But yeah, I mean, I don't think he was drafted in any of my leagues. I'd have to go back and check, but I doubt it. So my only problem with Isaac Brown is I just don't know how projectable he is to the NFL, and that's what makes me like real, like, because somebody, Felix in the chat here said Caleb Johnson, Amarian Hampton, Quinshon Judkins were those kinds of guys the past few years. Yeah. And they're all going to the NFL. Like, I don't know what Isaac Brown, like, he's real dynamic. Is he actually 190 pounds? I'm not sure. So that's what just makes it a little difficult for me. And for what it's worth, I think Durham's listed at 205. I don't know that he's 205 either, but I do think he's close to 200. I think he's closer to 200 than Isaac Brown is to 190. I do think that kind of matters at the end of the day. So, yeah. And then Ferris did say shout out to Ahmad Hardy too. Yeah, I mean, him and Fluff, I think, are both excellent as well.
Yep.
And I scooped Hardy in a couple of leagues, so hopefully
Bryson Washington too for Baylor.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see this. He feels like, and this is like just totally gut, he feels like one of those guys that I'm not necessarily sure if he carries over to next year. He just feels like that guy. Maybe it's because Baylor has had so many of those guys lately that it's just like subconsciously making me think that. He just feels like one of those guys to me. I'm not.
I get that.
And I did pick him up in a couple of leagues, especially like ones that had a limited waivers at the end of the year. So we'll see if he ends up doing that or not. I mean, I hope so, but I'm not like super convinced on that, but we will see for sure. And then Matt does ask, serious question: do you guys both expect Sam Levitt to remain the same or improve next year? Probably. I mean, they don't play a super tough schedule. They're in the big ASU's in the Big 12. Assuming Tyson comes back, I'd be interested to see that offense without Scadaboo.
Yeah.
Because he carried them pretty hard.
Yeah, Kyson Brown had a decent game, the one game where he was out. Jason Brown was a guy that was a freshman this past year in that class. I think you were higher than like the services or higher than most on him. I'm not going to say you were like hyping him up or high on him or anything, but he was a guy you liked, right?
Yeah, he was a guy that was kind of fell into that Caden Durham bucket where it was like, yeah, you take him at the end of a draft, and along with, I don't know, I guess I could pull up my freshman rankings and see exactly where I had him last year. But let's see here, 2024 freshman.
Yeah, but
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, as far as drafting Levitt, I was gonna move on, but if you want to bring him up.
So just the guys that I had, like it's between running backs like 12 and 25 in there. I had Jordan Lyle, Caden Durham, Braylon Russell, Darian Dupree, Jarek Gidson, Jason Brown, Aeneas Williams, Keedron Young was in there too. And it was just kind of like a, where do these guys kind of fall on the depth chart? And it's kind of tough to tell. And then Ferris here says, my actual concern with Isaac Brown is that his teammate Duke Watson was even better. So is it the line, offensive environment? Not sure. Yeah, I mean, that's a good question.
Well, and look at Garendo and Jawar Jordan from last year too.
Yeah.
Both guys who had great years. Garendo was super fast, so I think that's why he got drafted by the 49ers, and he's about to have some value for you right now with CMC and Jordan Mason. But I mean, I think offensive environment factor could definitely play a role there, but he's also a freshman, so you get that same environment for at least 2 years.
Braum has had some underrated like running back production over the years when he kind of gets a guy. Like I do think that it's a little slept on. When he was at Purdue, they had some decent teams there, like good, decent running backs there. So, and everyone thinks about Rondale Moore and David Bell and, then moving on to this team, but Jamari Thrash and some of those guys. So somebody in the chat says, it says, holy cow, fellas. And I feel like I have to read that part as well. Yes, West Virginia has offered Rich Rodriguez a 10-year deal to return per Jacksonville State beat reporters. That is a rumor that I had seen that Rich Rod was on their short list. Is Rich Rod, Jimmy Sexton, his agent? First off, the world's going to be a better place when Jimmy Sexton's gone. At least if you're a college football fan. So, because this guy gets all these dudes these contracts that are just so terrible. 10 years. Do you believe that? I don't believe that.
Man, I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen anything about that. I know I'd seen a little bit of smoke around him potentially returning back to West Virginia, but I mean, 10 years is a lot. And it's 61. Not like he had. He's 61.
He's 61. I mean,
he runs a very specific offensive system too.
Well, and he coached there before.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It'd be interesting.
I would be really hesitant to give him a long offer, like a long-term offer.
Yeah.
Because nothing that's happened after his first tenure at West Virginia leads me to believe that anything more than he might have just caught lightning in a bottle with Geno Smith and Tavon Austin on the same team at the same time. That kind of is what it feels like to me.
Yeah. But, was that Steve Slayton's team too?
Yes. Steve Slayton was also on that team. Yes.
Okay.
So, yeah. That's I don't know. I don't think.
You know what? Hey, I hope it's true because I also know they were sniffing around Andy Kotelnicki. So I would love to keep Andy Kotelnicki at Penn State for another year.
As a Pitt fan, I think I'd be okay with it too. Just throwing that out there.
Fair enough.
All right. Least valuable player. Go ahead.
I have two, and I mean, dealer's choice here on which one you think is worse. I think you could argue one way or the other. The two I have: Jackson Arnold, quarterback at Oklahoma, and Connor Wigman, quarterback at Texas A&M. Jackson Arnold went off the board as the 12th player overall, 13.1 ADP, so he's like right at the 1-2 turn. And then Connor Wigman had a 20th overall ADP, like player ADP there. So both of those guys just absolutely cratered in value. They both got benched at one point this year. Now, Jackson Arnold did take that job back. So, we'll see how that ends up playing out. They have a new offensive coordinator. So I think, Jackson Arnold was a first round guy and he plummeted in value, but there is a little bit of value to hang on to there. Connor Wigman was a mid to end second round guy. And a guy that we were very high on. Coming into this year, we'd seen a lot, you saw flashes in previous years before injuries, and I really liked the Colin Klein come higher and him coming in and into that system, and it just did not materialize with him this year. So I would probably lean Wigman as more of an LVP than Arnold, but Arnold definitely hurt you too.
Yeah, it's tough because I think Wegman is done, whereas I think Arnold still holds value.
Yeah.
So, but I think the Arnold flop was bigger because I think we all thought that, like, we said we didn't think Oklahoma would be that good this year on this show, and we said they might be lucky to win 6 games, and it was more of like a schedule thing / like we just thought the offensive line was bad. Like we said, like this offensive line is not good. They could struggle, but we didn't think that the offense would just fall apart. I think we didn't see that coming. Whereas I think with A&M, I think there were at least more things to potentially be worried about with them. Like the receivers are not good. Ruben Owens went down in the running back room behind them. Like I know that what's his name had a decent year before he even went down with an injury. Who was their backup running back? Former high 4-star kid.
Moss.
Yeah, Le'Veon Moss. Thank you.
Yeah.
Moss, was fine, but it wasn't anything special. I think maybe there should have been more warning signs with Wegman that we should have seen. So for me, I think I have to say Arnold was the less like the LVP because that just kind of came more out of nowhere. Like I think even a smart, like the sharpest C2C player, probably would have still been pretty in on Jackson Arnold for this year.
Yeah,
like generally speaking.
Right. And meanwhile, nobody at Campus to Canton said anything negative about Connor Wigman.
Never
there wasn't a single person on any of our shows who was skeptical on Wigman.
Nope.
Said they never saw an NFL throw from him or any wow throws or something along those lines. Nobody ever said anything like that. No. So, yeah, I agree.
Exactly. So, okay. And I Arnold was mine. So, but I do think it's close.
Maybe you should have wrote it down.
I know. Playoff MVP, Colin.
My playoff MVP is Taj Brooks. And I mean, he had a really nice year overall, but just those last 2 games down the stretch, I mean, he just absolutely exploded. He probably, let me pull it up here real quick. 28 carries, 133 yards, 3 touchdowns, 9 catches, 65 yards, and a 4th touchdown there 2 weeks ago. And then last week, 188 yards and 3 touchdowns. So he had 7 touchdowns in the final 2 weeks of your playoffs there, and over 100 yards in both games. Actually over 200 yards. No, 198 and then over 200 in the other one, all purpose. So just absolutely phenomenal finish down the stretch.
Yeah, he was on the winning team in the program, I believe. Whatever. Dumb. I didn't want to win it anyway. So I think there are 2 players that came to mind for me. One of them was Cam Scadaboo. I know he had a rough quarterfinal week, but then the next 2 weeks he had 147 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then in the championship game, he had 177 yards and 3 touchdowns. So he was the big one for me that first came to mind. And then Lenore Sellers was the other one for me. As a guy who had him on my program team and didn't start him a single time in the playoffs, which, looking back on it, maybe should have done that. But I mean, he had a bunch of really strong finishes to the end of the year there as well. And yes, his championship performance was only like 31 points or something like that against Clemson. But the rushing production he put up week in, week out, had 171 yards and 2 touchdowns against Clemson, had 68 yards rushing and a touchdown against Wofford, had 50 yards rushing against Mizzou. But in that game, he threw for almost 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. 3 passing touchdowns against Wofford. I mean, he had some really monster performances down the stretch there as well. So those were the 2 that I had for my playoff MVP.
Yeah, I think that's very fair.
Players that we were the most right on this season, Colin. And trust me when I say our lists are just as long as the guys that we had wrong as the guys that we had right that we came up with tonight. Players that we liked coming into the season and played well, or players that we did not like coming into the season and played poorly. And for the record, I will just say jointly, Ollie Gordon, we absolutely nailed that for the record. So.
Yes. Yeah, we did. Now, he was even worse than what we thought he was going to be. But first one on my list is Noah Fafita. I kept saying, like, I don't really see it with Fafita, especially from an NFL perspective. But then when Jed Fish left, I was very, very skeptical on how well he would and that offense would be able to, keep things going under Brent Brennan. I don't remember which one it is.
You're doing great.
Thanks. Under the new head coach there, I was very skeptical about the production he would put up and just did not have a very good year at all. Talk about other quarterbacks who absolutely tanked their value in Noah Fafita. And he's a guy that a lot of people were really hyping up to, but, probably my best fade of the year.
And then the other guys that you liked this year and they ended up having strong years.
Denzel Boston is one, and this player I talked a little bit about last week, but Denzel Boston's a player that I first started talking about like 2 years ago. So they had McMillan and Polk and Adunze there, but I was like, man, keep an eye out on Boston behind them. Like they keep raving about him in camp. Nate Marquise is another guy who was really all over Boston too. And then in this spring, the hype really started to build with Boston. I mean, they brought in Jed Fish, who I was just talking about with Arizona. They bring in Will Rogers to keep that quarterback room, the quarterback production there stable. So not only did he have a good year from a CFF perspective, but I think he had a really good Devy year too. I don't think he comes out this year just if he's smart with the depth of that class, but he's got a chance to be a top 5 name in next year's class already.
Yeah, he does. And we talked about him. We drafted him in that episode last week, probably around the same range as Jordan Tyson. Might have been a little bit earlier. But
yeah.
And
then the last name, never wrong, just early, Jaden Mayava. A lot of us here were pretty high on Mayava. I didn't really ever see it with Moss. I think he's a fine quarterback, but just not really up to the traditional standards of USC. And that whole team struggled this year. And I kind of thought Mayava would take over a little bit sooner. But it took him a little while to get his opportunity. But when he did, he made some mistakes. And he's a player that I wrote up in the Devy Guide honorable mention article, where last year as a freshman, he made some freshman mistakes. You saw it with him where he's a gunslinger. He's not afraid to test tight windows. And sometimes he'll miss corners and he'll miss, some guys in coverage. So he did have 2 interceptions in the, over those last 3 games there. But he also threw against Notre Dame, 360 yards, 3 touchdowns. He had 2 touchdowns on the ground. He brought you some rushing production. And Miller Moss is in the portal. So I think at this point, Mayava is heading into next year looking like he's going to be the starting quarterback at USC, which is something that we thought could happen this year. And like I said, never wrong. Just we were a little early, but it's good to see it come to fruition.
All right. The players that I wrote down here. So, and we do every year our player that we think is going to help their stock the most, it's going to hurt their stock the most, and then the bold prediction. Is that the 3? A hot take? We do it at the
we
beginning.
didn't do a bold prediction this year, I don't think.
Okay, so we just did player help hurt the most. I did say player that would help their stock the most was Mario Anderson. I don't know if he's going to be a second round pick or anything, but he had a great year, and I do think he probably gets drafted. So coming off a lackluster year at South Carolina, I feel pretty good about that. But the guys that I highlighted here, Xavier Restrepo, I had said I thought he could contend for the wide receiver 1 overall in CFF, and he didn't quite get there, but he was top 6 or 7. And I believe of all, like in the best ball stuff where it's power 4 only, I believe he was wide receiver 1 or very close to it. So that one was a big one for me there. I said that I didn't like Calandria at all at Virginia. I did not think he was a very good player. Did not play well at all this year and is in the portal. We didn't talk about him at the beginning of the show. I think he has to take at least a step down, if not more than that. He's the ball deep every single time he can. That's pretty much all he can do. That's his skill set. Don't see much of a player there. And then Tyler Warren, who I had rated as my tight end 2 coming into the year ahead of Colston Loveland. And I will stick by that. Super dynamic player. Just can do a little bit of everything. I really, really like him. He reminds me a lot of George Kittle. He's not quite the blocker that Kittle is in terms of like the tenacity, I guess, like as like a fighter. I don't think he's quite Kittle, but from what he can do as like a receiver and stuff, I think he's pretty on par there. So those were my better players. I think passer. Well, Kittle's thrown some passes, hasn't he, in the NFL? Maybe.
I don't know.
Dropped a bad one last night. I do remember that. All right, players that we were wrong on, and I excluded Colorado from this for me, so I'm not going to talk about that.
Well, if we go back to things I was right about, Travis Hunter is the wide receiver 1 for Colorado. You were more team Wester, I was more team Hunter, so put one in my column for that one. But players we were wrong on the most, you talked about players that we thought were going to help themselves the most this year. Kyron Jones was my player that I named for that, and that very much did not happen. Struggled all year. He got a little bit banged up at the beginning of the year, dealt with some injuries off and on, but even then, just did not look very good. And apparently Virginia Tech is just an absolute breeding ground for NFL talent based on the Senior Bowl rosters. So, especially at the skill positions. So, it's hard to say exactly what happened there, but he did take a pretty significant step back. It was not very helpful for you in CFF, and then his Devy stock obviously took a hit too. He's a player who's in the portal. We'll see where he ends up. I think that's going to be a really interesting name. I think there's some guys out there who have some, systems that I could see him being interesting. Gus Malzahn going to Florida State. I think Kyron Jones would be interesting in the Malzahn system, but they also have Castellanos. There's a number of other guys that could be in the portal there too that may be a little bit more interesting, but the hope's not dead on Jones, but it's on life support, I think. At least for a CFF value.
I think he could be a post-type guy next year. He actually might be a big buy for me this offseason. We'll have to see where his price settles in. I don't know if people spent up to get him, they might be less inclined to sell for cheap. They might just say, I'll hold on. And you might run into that. But I think he could be a post-hype guy this year, just like from a CFF perspective. And then obviously I do think that the NFL stuff could follow behind it there as well.
Next name on the list for me is another quarterback there, Caden Salter.
No response. Just sitting. Okay.
Oh, sorry. I didn't know you wanted a response.
No,
I think that's a good point. I think it's a good point. Like I said, the hope's not dead for Kyron Jones. I think he could be a potential post-hype guy, and the tools are there for the NFL. So if you want to get into that discussion, there could be an NFL team that ends up liking him. But yeah, the next guy on my list here is Caden Salter, a guy that I thought was going to have everybody really for CFF thought that he was going to kind of repeat the year that he had before. I even put a Heisman bet down on him.
Did you?
He was, the odds were really good. I was like plus.
There's a reason for that usually, Colin.
Yeah. It was like plus 7,000, plus 6,000, something like that. And I was like, well, if Liberty goes undefeated, makes the playoff, and there's not really like a
hell freezes over.
Yeah. There's not really like a clear-cut guy. I mean, the two top options this year are a running back and a cornerback / wide receiver. Now they're both good options, but like heading into the year, like how many people thought Gene T was actually going to be in Heisman contention? You know, how many people thought Travis Hunter was actually going to be in Heisman contention? Probably more, but it just highlights it was a weaker pool. So I thought Caden Salter could have that type of a year. Very, very much did not. I also thought he was my guy in the Devi guide. I bumped him up a tier because I thought we were a little bit too low. Thought if he had a really nice year this year, bumps it up to the Power 5 level. He's got the tools. He would have some production behind him. He has a good recruiting pedigree as well. And depending on where he ended up at the Power 5 level, I thought there was going to be enough there that I could see an outside shot at like a first-round quarterback, probably more likely top 50 in the best case scenario. But none of that came to fruition. So we'll see where he ends up. Another guy who the hope isn't dead, it's on life support for, but another miss of mine for sure.
Him and Byron Brown both.
Mm-hmm.
At least Byron Brown was injured. He wasn't good before that either, but that one surprised me too.
Yeah. And then the last one for me, it's also it's injury related. Speaking of injuries here, but Chip Tranum, the running back for Kentucky, injured, never really healthy. Came back here at the end of the year, but at that point, Kentucky was a dumpster fire. So not like 100% our fault or my fault on that, but still, it was not a great call. Did not have a good year. And I also thought there could be some Devi potential there too. If he was able to do what some of the other Kentucky running backs did. Chris Rodriguez, Ray Davis, some of those other types of guys, Benny Snell. I thought he was pretty athletic. I thought he could kind of slide into that like Ray Davis range. But I don't think that's going to happen now at this point.
Yeah, he technically could get a medical red shirt this year. Do you think he does that? And do you think he leaves Kentucky to do it? He only played 3 games.
Interesting. I think he should do it if he wants to play in the NFL. So I think he should do it, and we'll see where he ends up.
Yeah, his game log for this year: 7 carries for 26 yards against Florida in Week 8. Then he went 8 for 42 against Murray State in Week 12, and then 4 for 33 against Louisville this past week.
Okay, 3 games. So he just has to not play. Well, are they even bowl eligible? I don't think they are.
I don't know.
I
wasn't following Kentucky that closely. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. No, they're not. So
nope. Okay. Well, there we go. Maybe he goes somewhere else.
Yeah, I could see him leaving. He's from that area though. He's from No, I'm good.
Florida State. Sorry.
Gus Malzahn's washed, right? Like as a coach. Can we all agree on that?
I don't know. We'll see.
I think he is.
I think it'd be an offensive guy, really. That'd all be there for, but we'll see.
He's a dinosaur, I think. Kesha sings a song about that.
So you think Gus Malzahn is going to be the interim head coach next year after Norvell gets fired and then he gets canned too?
No, I think they'll fire them all. No, I don't think so. We'll see, but no, I actually would be surprised if Malzahn gets another head coaching job. I would. I don't know, just a feeling I have. Let's see here. Players I was most wrong on. So I didn't even think Eli Holstein was an FBS level quarterback. So he proved me wrong on that one. This year at Pitt there was much better than I anticipated him being. I thought that offense would be a lot more like just running him, but was not the case. Cade Klubnik bounced back way better than I thought that he was capable of doing this year. I know that they've faded a little bit over the past couple of weeks, but I think that's less of a Klubnik problem and more of just, offensive line, generally speaking, offensive line issue, which was, kind of a fear coming into the year. Sticking on that same team, David Eziamume, I thought he would be the backup back there, and he was not. And now, not even 100% sure if he'll be the backup going into next year. So that's a little bit concerning. I've dropped him probably by 80 spots in my rankings overall at the running back position. And then Stanford, you had mentioned earlier. I was like, did you read my sheet later? Stanford. I thought that offense would be so much more well put together this year. I expected a lot of Ashton Daniels. I expected more out of Alec Aminor. I expected more out of the running back room there. And really none of that came to fruition, and it was especially annoying because they had their spots, There were some games where they like played pretty well offensively, but there were others where it was just painful. So that one was not good. Biggest offseason buy, Colin. Who's too cheap right now?
This is a player that is starting to get a little bit of buzz, and I think he might be difficult to buy depending on who the manager is that has him. But Quentin Joyner, the running back at USC. This is 2 years in a row now that USC has had good running back production from Marshawn Lloyd. This year, Jaquavis Marks, who almost cost me a championship with that injury that he suffered. So
wow, what a jerk. How dare he get injured on your time?
I know. Almost cost me some money. But, he had a good year this year too. So the running back position, there has been pretty good the last 2 years. And Quentin Joyner, I think, might be the most overall talented out of the three of those. I mean, they're Marks and Lloyd are pretty good, but I like Joyner. I think he's an explosive player. He had 14 runs over 10 yards this year out of 64 carries. He also had 23 missed forced tackles. So, he's got a ability to shake some tackles and stuff like that. He had 12 catches this year too. So I think he offers something in the passing game. I think he's a pretty well-rounded skill set. He got up to 216 this year too, which kind of surprised me a little bit that he got up that high. Let's hope he doesn't keep putting on weight, given what we've seen.
240. 240.
But I think Quentin Joyner could be set up for a really nice year next year. The biggest worry, at least from a CFF perspective, would be like Maava vulturing a couple touchdowns like he kind of did towards as he got in, especially in that Notre Dame game. But I think Quentin Joyner can have a really nice year next year.
Okay. I don't think he's super cheap anymore. From deals that I've seen or heard go down, he's valued as a top 20 running back, I think, like excluding all the guys that are leaving. I think he's already been pushed up into that range for a lot of people. So you will have to pay a little bit, but obviously if you think he's closer to top 10 than top 20, then maybe that's not a bad value for you. I wrote down Brashard Smith because technically SMU is still playing and he's technically still a college player. I think he's a buy. I think he's going to go to the NFL and be good. He's got a real nice, well-rounded skill set. Obviously, they talked a lot about him on Debbie Debate, or not Debbie Debate, back to Debbie last week, and then we've talked about it a little bit. But former wide receiver, as a true freshman, hit 6 of the 8-year 1-0 thresholds. Never really caught on, but is like a 90-something percentile athlete. I think they were saying last week on Back to Debbie, one of the top athletic comps for him in our database is Tyreek Hill. He has like a 4.35 40 on his resume. Like he's really athletic. Now, obviously, he's bulked up a little bit, but you could see he was pulling away from defenders on those long runs this year. I mean, he's got the receiving chops. I think there's a real chance that and I think because of his skill set and because of how the NFL has been valuing some of these guys from recently, I think if he weighs in at 205-ish, I don't think he has to get bigger than that. I don't think he has to get to 215, 220, even above 210. I think he can stay right around 205 and be fine. So I think that's where he will probably settle in. Good athlete, good production this year, and is really his first year as a running back. Really interesting background. I think he's a really big buy right now. And I think it would really depend on the person who's holding him, what they value him as, but they might be seeing it as a way to kind of get out after getting all the CFF production from him, and you might be able to get him for fairly cheap.
Well, I mean, that could be a mindset that I could see somebody having, especially given last week we were talking about, hey, after you get the CFF value for some guys, throughout the whole year, sell them if you don't believe in them as Devi assets. Guys we talked about are Tez Johnson, Ollie Gordon. I mean, obviously,
Caleb Johnson.
Value
Marion
created there,
Hampton.
but Caleb Johnson and Marion Hampton. Yeah, those types of guys. I could see somebody viewing Brashard Smith similarly. I did not realize he was that level of an athlete, though.
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, he's super athlete. So, good player. And then looking forward to 2025, who's going to be next year's Ollie Gordon, Colin? Who's going to just completely face plant and lose a ton of value? This guy has to be projected right now to be like a top 3 or 4 round.
It's always hard to.
So that'll be the rule. It has to be like
right,
a top
right.
48
I think it's always. I think it's always really tough to pick those guys because like the thing with them is they kind of come out of nowhere of sorts. I think, and there's also so many guys leaving right now. It's hard to say. I'll go with Justice Haynes. Haynes. If Jam Miller comes back, they're splitting that backfield again. Justice Haynes is a guy who's right now is my RB9. A guy that we like the skill set, so it's kind of the opposite of Ollie Gordon. Ollie Gordon we liked the production we saw. We didn't necessarily like the skill set. I think Haynes is going to be the opposite, a guy that we like the skill set, but I don't know if we're going to like that production. But if Jam Miller comes back and Milroe comes back, that's just really going to limit Haynes's touches. And then now we're entering year 3, which is very little workload for him. I could see him plummeting in value.
Okay. I've got 2. And one kind of follows the Gordon timeline and one's a year early. Cedric Baxter, I think, has a chance. I think there's a chance that he's not a factor for Texas next year.
Who do you think would lead that backfield then?
Somebody else. Like, not to be a smart ass. Wisner, Gibson, Clark when he comes back. I think there's a real chance that Baxter is not the guy there next year, which will crush his stock. And he went, when we did our mock, was that 2 weeks ago or whatever, he went 201, and that was, you took him at 201.
Yeah.
And then, funny enough, the other guy is actually also a Texas guy, Ryan Wingo. I think Wingo is a bit of a, kind of one of those tweener, not really a developed skill set right now. And if he doesn't continue to develop it over the offseason into next year, like, the splash plays are kind of cool, but I think if that's still only what he's doing after year 2, you're kind of looking at some issues there. So those are 2 big guys that I'm looking at. And then one, I will just say, I like Aiden Childs, but I think there's a real chance that we don't see development next year. And I think his stock would just plummet as well. And we took him at the 3.2 last or 2 weeks ago when we did our mock. I think he's a really risky profile to go in the first 5 rounds.
I get that. I definitely get that.
So, and then the one we already talked about last week that we took in a draft last week or 2 weeks ago, Katron Allen. I just not to hammer it home anymore, but I think he's a guy that if someone in your league still values him in that range, you got to ship him off today.
I mean, we'll see how it ends up shaking out at Penn State there. I still think there's going to be some CFF value.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this week's show, guys. Thanks to everybody who hopped in with us, did a live show with us. Maybe if the reviews are positive, maybe we'll do some more in the future. Who's to say? Make sure you're checking out everything over at campus2canton.com, guys. Don't want to be a member, articles, the podcast feed, the YouTube channel, all that stuff is free for you guys. So you can go ahead, check all that stuff out. And memberships do start as low as $2.99 a month. We are doing through, I guess today's the last day. By the time people listen to this, it's probably over 50% off yearly memberships. So we did that for Black Friday through Cyber Monday. That's it. That's it for
subscribe to the video. That might get us more to do more live shows. What's
don't know.
Felix's number that he always aims at?
Well,
50?
he wants 50 likes, and his goal right now is to get us to 4,000 subscribers. We're pretty close to that. So,
50 likes. We gotta get 50 likes. If we get 50 likes, we'll do another live show at some point during the off season.
And Colin will do it in his robe.
I will.
He was
I'll do it
generous enough to not do for us tonight. So thank you.
Yeah,
Colin.
you're welcome. I with the robe comment though, I'm always clothed underneath it. I'm not one of those types of people. Not there's not anything wrong with that. No robe person is a bad robe person, but you know, I wear clothes underneath it. So
yeah, I never said you didn't. People just ran with it. So
yeah,
let them believe what they want to believe. You know, it's a lot more fun than the truth.
Yeah. Speaking of robes, though, I don't think Matt's listening anymore, but he owes me one from that Blake Corum bet that we had. I didn't forget, Matt.
Okay.
I didn't forget.
Well, Christmas is coming.
It is, yeah. Not that I'm expecting it anytime soon, but it's okay.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week with another episode of Campus Life. Until then, guys, I'm Austin.
And this is Colin.
And have a good one.